Got it. Okay, so today we'll deal with the Parshas Sisa, which is the Parsha of the Egel, the Parsha of the Golden Calf. It begins with the mitzvah of the Machzis HaShekel, which we understand, according to many of the commentaries, was a atonement for the sin of the golden calf. Even though that it's not recorded in the Torah until the middle of the Parsha, nevertheless, this opening part of the Parsha, which is about the giving of the half shekel, which was read actually a few weeks ago, Parsha Shkolim, at the very beginning of the month of Adar. Nevertheless, this is its source, the place that it comes from. The Torah tells us, Ki sisas rosh bnei Yisrael, when you lift up the heads of the Jewish people, if kudehem, in order.
Up the slope. We're starting to see the level. It's important to remember.
Okay, this that ki sisas rosh bnei Yisrael if kudehem. When you count the Jews, you lift up their heads and you count them. V'nosnu ish kofer nafsho. Every person gives an atonement for his life. Bifkodosam. When you count them, v'lo yiyeh behem negev bifkodosam, and there won't be any damage. There won't be any plague that comes to them because of the giving of the machzis shekel. Ze yitnu. This is what they should give. Kala over ala pikudim. Machzis shekel, a half a shekel b'shekel kodesh. Esrim Geira gives the size of it, the amount, and this will be a truma Hashem. This will be a gift to God. The Gemara Menachos comments that there were three things that were difficult to Moshe until God pointed to them and showed them to Moshe, and that Moshe was able to now deal with them. The Gemara Menachos says that one of them was the building of the menorah, the second was Rosh Chodesh, and the third was Shratzim, were the different kinds of creepy crawly things that you weren't allowed to eat. And we know this because the pasuk says the word zeh in each one of them. V'zeh ma'aseh ha-menorah. This is the way to make the menorah. HaChodesh ha-zeh lochem rosh chadashim. This month is for you, showing him the way that the sliver of the month, the new month, which way it faced, and how you'd be able to tell that this was the new sliver of the month. V'zeh lochem ha-tamei. And this is for you, the tamei. So Tosfos asks the obvious question, and he says, wait a second, what about machzis ha-shekel? Because in the machzis shekel, the half shekel, it says zeh yitnu, this you shall give. If you're going to tell me that the language of zeh is ki'ilu God pointing at something and saying this is what it is, then why don't we say the same thing by the machzis shekel? Why was that left out of the group? As a matter of fact, Chazal tell us that God did actually point to the machzis shekel, and he showed him a matbeya shel ish, a coin of fire. And it said, Zeh yitnu, this is what you should give. So it really was the same as the other three. Why wasn't it included in the list? Shita Mekubetzes and other commentaries answer that the reason that it wasn't listed in the list is because it wasn't the same as the others. It wasn't that it was difficult to Moshe. It wasn't that he couldn't figure out how to do it. A coin, we know what coins are. It's not a problem. A half a coin, also not a problem. To know how to build the menorah, to know how to understand the moon and the intercalations of the moon, and to understand which animals are which, that was complicated. And that was what God had to show Moshe, Zeh, this is what you need to know. But when it comes to the half coin, that wasn't a difficulty. It wasn't that he couldn't visualize what needed to be given. He couldn't conceptualize what needed to be given. And that's why it wasn't included in the list. Because the list of three that the Gemara Menachos talks about is a list of things that Moshe couldn't visualize. This he had no problem visualizing. This he couldn't conceptualize. How could this half shekel work? That he couldn't understand. Okay, but still you have to wonder, what was Moshe's conceptual problem? What couldn't he conceive? What couldn't he understand? And how did a fiery coin make it any better for him? That God shows him a fiery coin, and Moshe says, oh, now I get it. What couldn't he have gotten until then that he needed to see a matbeya shel ish? What was bothering Moshe about this giving of the machzis shekel? Let's talk a little bit about the Egel Hazav, the golden calf, this was a remedy for the golden calf. The Torah tells us that we made an Egel, we danced around the Egel, and we declared, Eile Elokecha Yisrael. These are your gods, O Israel. Now, why it says these, the plural, there's all kinds of explanations. It's not unnatural to use that kind of language when you're describing things that have to do with elokus, things that have to do with godliness and with leadership. And they pointed to it and said, Eila Elokecha Yisrael. These are your gods, Israel. The only problem is that in the book of Nehemiah, when the sin of the golden calf is described, it's described in different terms. It says, V'yasu lehem egel, they made for them a calf, Vayomru zeh Elokecha Yisrael. And they said, this is your God, Israel, Asher ha'alucha mimitzrayim, that take you out of Egypt. It's perhaps a better description than the Torah's description of Eila. Why didn't the Torah use those words, zeh? You know, when they approached Aaron at the beginning of the Parsha, it's fascinating that they said, Ki zeh Moshe ish. They used the word zeh. And zeh was considered their sin. Because the Medrash says, Chatu bazeh, that we sinned with the word zeh. When we went to Aaron and we said to him, Ki zeh Moshe ish, that was a transgression, the beginning of the transgression. The word zeh, this, that was part of their transgression, part of the chet ha'egel, of the sin of the golden calf. Laku bazeh, they suffered with zeh. As it says, Al zeh haya dovel libenu. On this, our heart was broken. Umenachemim bazeh. And we're going to be comforted with the word zeh. Dichsiv, because it's written, Hinei Elokeinu zeh kivinu lo v'hoshienu. That this is our God, zeh kivinu lo, we waited for him, v'hoshienu, and he saved us. It seems like the sin was about the word zeh, not about the word Eila. Which was it, in fact? Was it about zeh, this, or was it about Eila, these? You know, I have the incredible bracha of learning with my son every day. And we learn B'chavrusa, we learn a Besmerish, we learn, just a gift. Yesterday, we also have, Baruch Hashem, the great pleasure of doing podcasts with each other. Yesterday, we got distracted in our learning and we ended up talking about the podcast. At the end of the learning session, I looked at my son and I said, I guess on Monday night when we make the podcast, we should probably learn the Gemara that we were supposed to learn today. You know, we should probably learn Gittin. Because if we were supposed to do that then, so then we should do this, you know, in that spot. It's very often very hard for us to focus on the thing we're meant to do. When we're davening, we're thinking about working. When we're working, we're thinking about our families. When we're with our families, we're thinking about working. It's very difficult to focus ourselves, to pull everything together, because there's lots of competition on our attention. There's a lot of competition on our focus. We can be somewhere, and at the same time, we could be somewhere else. But it's not just because it's hard to focus. Sometimes it feels like there is a distinct advantage to remaining unfocused. Because when we stay unfocused, we're not bound to anything. If I belong to 3 synagogues, so then when things get a little tough for me over here, when I don't like the direction they're going, I think maybe it's getting a little bit too religious for me, I can reaffiliate myself over there. When I feel that over here is requiring a tremendous commitment, and I'm not ready for that commitment, I can just realign myself in another place. Being eclectic is sometimes feels like a great advantage because I'm not bound to anything. I'm made up of a bunch of little different parts, and I'm not responsible to any one of them. I'm a jack of all trades, but a master of none. This is what Chazal are telling us, that this was the real sin of the Chet HaEgel, of the sin of the golden calf. Eile Elokecha Yisrael, says the Torah. Says the Gemara in Avodah Zarah, what does the word Eile mean? These. Ivu Aleph, Ivu Lamed Le'elokus Hey Harbe. They wanted many gods. They wanted to be eclectic. Because if they could be eclectic, take a little bit from here and a little bit of this ideology and a little bit of this philosophy, then they're bound to nothing. And that was the chet. That was the sin, our inability and lack of desire to declare our loyalty to one way. Living a Chinese menu is certainly easier. Take one from column A, one from column B, one from column C, mix it together, get a little bit of this, a little bit of this. Because there's no achrayas, there's no sense of responsibility, no sense of being beholden to any one ideology or any one pathway. The word Eila was a manifestation of the Chet HaEgel. But it came from a rejection of Zeh. It came from a rejection of this, of something that is united, something that is all together, that is focused and one. Moshe Rabbeinu represented the quintessential Zeh. Moshe Rabbeinu took all the parts of his life and he joined them together in order to be able to serve God. The ultimate was that he was able to speak to God face to face, because Moshe was all about one thing. There was one center cord that wove its way through the life of Moshe. Moshe was the quintessential example of what a Zeh is. And we rejected that. We turned to Aaron and we said, Ki Zeh Moshe Ish. This Moshe, the Zeh of Moshe, we don't want that. We don't know where it is. We don't know what role it plays in our lives. Our rejection was a rejection of Zeh and an embracing of Eila, an embracing of these, of being more open, of being more diffuse, of being more eclectic. And that's what the rabbis were telling us. Chatu b'zeh, we sinned with Zeh by rejecting Zeh. Laku b'zeh, we were suffered through that Zeh. But our ultimate nechama is going to come when we recognize the Zeh. We put it all together. When Zeh, Hinei Elokeinu Zeh, Kivinu lo v'yoshienu, we waited for this moment to be connected and reunited with him. V'yoshienu, and he saves us. So how do we reach that Zeh? How do we reach that focus of putting everything together, of uniting all of our parts into one thing? That's the mitzvah of machzah shekel. We weren't commanded to give a shekel. We weren't commanded to give something whole. We were commanded to take our parts, our diffuse nature, to take that and to give it to a common plate, to a common collection, which was used for karbanos tzibur, for public offerings, for communal offerings, to take our pieces, to join them together, and to make one whole. And that's what Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't get. How is a small little coin like that going to be mechaper on the Chet HaEgel? Because the whole concept of machzah shekel is taking those pieces, taking those halves, taking all of our little parts and being ma'achad them, joining them together under the heading of Avodas Hashem. When we focus and we unite our pieces, then we can succeed. When we turn our Eila into Zeh, that's how we do it. But why was that so complicated? Why couldn't Moshe get that? Why couldn't God have just simply explained to him that that's what you got to do? Moshe, you're the Zeh, they're the Eila. You gotta teach them how to become a Zeh. You got to teach them how to pull it all together and just use this coin as a symbol. What do you have to show him the coin for? It's not complicated. Take a half a coin. You could take a half a peanut. You could do anything with a half, and you can show them this. What's complicated? Because what Moshe couldn't get was how is just giving a half shekel going to do that? It's so subtle and it's so difficult. Just to give a half a coin and expect that this is going to draw all of me together? What really is behind this machatzis shekel? What's the thing that turns it into one? And that's why he showed him a matbeah shel eish. He showed him a coin of fire. And he showed them that that's the way you bring things together. You melt them. You heat them up. You watch them melt into one. You take this ingredient, you take that ingredient, you take this piece, you take that piece, you put them all into one pot. And that whole mixture becomes one united mixture because the fire brings it all together. The fire, the desire to be miraculous, to join it all together, unifies them, unifies all the koiches, unifies all the capabilities, makes all of the parts of something, of a unit, into one. And when it comes to a person, so it takes our work and it takes our family, it takes our learning, it takes our leisure, and it unites it. It heats it up. It fires it up to one thing, to be an eish, to be a fire to God, to be something that's engaged in the service of God. And when all of our pieces are united together, they're fused together, when they all have the same goal and they all have the same focus and they all have the same reason, when my work is for the same reason that my leisure is, when my family is for the same reason that my learning is, when it's all about avodas Hashem, when it's all about serving God, when it's melted and melded together into one, when you take the Eila and you turn it into Zeh through the introduction of fire, of dedication, of a hislavus, of a burning desire that it should all be one. That's the atonement. That's the way to cleanse the effects of the Chet HaEgel, the sin of the golden calf. The sin of wanting to be Eila, of wanting to be diffuse and eclectic. And that's what the Gemara is telling us. That chatu bezeh, laku bezeh, when we saw the oneness of our life destroyed, we saw that Beis HaMikdash sitting in front of us in ashes, banu menachemim bezeh. When we rekindle that fire inside of us, to join together all of our pieces, to melt them and meld them all together. So then, Hine Elokeinu Zeh, we'll be able to see our God as a Zeh. We'll be able to appreciate wanting to be one and wanting to be focused and wanting to be like Moshe. Ki Zeh Moshe Ish. That it won't be a rejection of that. It will be looking at that as our example, as our paradigm, as our goal. Kivinu lo, when we hope for that day, then Voshienu, then that is going to be the thing that is going to save us, that is going to uplift us, and going to take all of our pieces and turn them into one, unifying us and uniting us in the service of Hashem. That's my my thought. I don't give refunds for being a little short, but the mic and the floor is open. Okay. Well, I wish everybody a beautiful, wonderful, and amazing Shabbos. And Mirz Hashem, this idea of bringing our whole selves together, bringing all of the disparate parts of our lives and our interests, bringing them all together, united in serving Hashem, should, for ourselves personally, bring us to a place of Yoshienu, should bring us to a place of salvation and a place of beauty and bracha. Everybody should have an amazing Shabbos, and we will see you in Mirz Hashem on Sunday.
Thank you so much,
Thank you,
Rabbi.
Yashar Koach.
Okay, my pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Good
Have a wonderful
Shabbos.
Shabbat, everyone.
Beautiful day, beautiful
Have a great
Shabbos.
Shabbat, everyone.
You too.
Amen.
Thank you.
Bye bye, everybody.
Thank you.